In Photoshop, where you have the brush tool, and if you know how to use the brush tool, changing the size of it, changing how it works, you can use a lot of other tools. The pen tool tends to be that type of tool that allows you to make lots of other objects. With this one, you're making freeform objects. With our shapes, you're kind of stuck with whatever shape it is, and then you have to transform it. The other tool that's associated with it is the pencil tool, and it's going to work a lot like the pen tool, but it give you a little more free-form abilities. I'm going to show you the pen tool first because there's a lot that you can do with it. For these notes that I'm giving you, just know that everything we're doing with just the pen tool. However, if you click and hold on this particular tool and it pops out, be aware there's some other tools that look kind of similar. There's add anchor point, delete anchor point, and convert anchor point. And I'll show you what these do once we work with it. All I'm going to use today is just the pen tool. So when I load this up, remember that vector objects, what are vector objects made of? What do we say makes them different? The points. They're all made up of individual points. And you got to tell the computer what point you want it to be, and it'll draw the lines for it. The pen tool allows you to do that. So with this one, as long as I click just once, I can add, you see I've added a little point. And then when I click again, there's my second point, and the computer is drawing the connection between those two. So as long as I'm clicking just once for each one, I can add points to my line, and the computer draws off those vector points. Nothing major, nothing bad about that. As long as I'm drawing, I've got an open object. Notice that it's not completely closed off. Watch what happens when I come back to my original point. See the little circle that appears on my pen tool? That means it's going to close off my object. So when I click on it, now it's one solid object that I'm working with. Pretty cool? So with this one, that's the main thing that the pen tool does. You can free draw any shape that you want by clicking exactly where you want those points to be, and when you come back to the beginning, boom, you've got that point closed off, that object closed off. Here's the second thing that the pen tool will allow you to do. So if I've created points, let's say I want to add points or take away points. So I've still got my pen tool selected. If I hover over any one of these vector points, watch the bottom, I'll do this one, the bottom right corner. See how it becomes a minus sign? That means it's going to take away that point. So the pen tool also lets me remove anchor points. And if I remove them, the lines will just be connected to the next two ones. So if I need to get rid of them, all I'm doing is clicking back on those lines and removing those. Notice that if it does go over, it will overlap just like that. If I need to move any of these points around, remember you can always use your direct selection tool. That's the tool that allows you to click on points and relocate them and start creating those objects. Same thing, if I grab my pen tool again, instead of clicking on a point and erasing it, if I click anywhere on a line, notice that I get a plus sign. This will allow me to add points to an object. Right now it's just going to add points to the straight line, but if I grab my selection tool, my white arrow, I can start changing those up and creating points from that area as well. All cool? That's the easy part about using the pen tool. Let's get hard, let's get difficult. I'm going to select these, hit my delete button, and delete them away. So I can make straight points as long as I'm clicking once. What if I want to make a curved point, Mr. Ivy? How do I do that? Here's how you make a curved line. Click and drag out. And this will give you your, what are these handles called? Y'all remember?
Does it start with a B?
Starts with a B. Makes for a great test question. Bayesian handles. Bayesian. So I get my two Bayesian handles. The one on the left is controlling the curve of that one. Notice I also have one on the right. So it clicks, create the curve. If I was to click just one more time, it's going to complete out that curve because I've got this handle right here. Now if I click again, just once, it's going to give me a straight line. So as long as I'm clicking and dragging, I can create Bayesian curves and I can draw them off. And this is what's going to give me my curved objects to work with. This is one thing that makes the pen tool very difficult. It's controlling how these curves are going to be moving as you create stuff. When we get into the project, I'll give you something to think about when drawing off curved objects. But again, if I click on it again, at the end it will finish off that curve point, and then I've got a whole object. If I need to modify my object, I've got my white arrow, direct selection tool. I can either click on a point and move it, or I can click on that Bayesian handle and be able to control the curve of that particular point. And that's what we did on those little exercises as well. So, pen tool is free-form drawing, very easy to do to curve that up and work with that as well. Let's add on to that. Let's make it a little bit more difficult. Let's delete that one away. Got my pen tool. If I click and drag, so I've got a curve here. If I click again, what happens? It's going to finish out the curve. Because there's a Bayesian handle here, it's going to click over and drag again. What happens if I click and drag? Let's say I don't want there to be a curve. I want it to be a straight line going down from here. What I want to do is I want to get rid of this side of my curve, this Bayesian handle. Here's the quick and easy way of doing that. I've clicked and drag. Click on that point again. Notice the little arrow that's on the bottom right-hand side? That's my convert anchor point. So when I click on it, it converts it. That's gone. So if I click again, notice it's now a straight line. So click and drag. If I click on it again, it erases that one. And now I've got a straight line to be able to draw something like this. This comes in handy. I'll delete this away. So let's say I wanted to draw something kind of like a shark fin. If I click and drag up, well, if I click again down here, it's going to do that. That's not what I want. I'll undo that, Command Z. But if I click here again, I can click and drag it the other way, and I can get a curve that looks like that. So that's one reason why you would want to get rid of that last Bayesian handle. I can then click and drag and do very precise curves on that particular point as well. Click, click again, click, click again from there. All cool? Here's the next thing. Let's draw some more curves with our pen tool. So I'll click, click and drag. We'll click and drag, click and drag. If I use my white arrow tool and I click on a point, what have you been noticing about when I click one side of a curve? The other side also gets affected, kind of like a seesaw. I can move it in and out, but they still kind of stay on the same, relatively same tangent with each other. Let's say I wanted to only affect this Bayesian curve. I wanted to move it without moving this Bayesian curve. Let's choose our pen tool again. This time, I'm going to hold down my Option button, Option key. When I hold it down, notice my pen tool turns into the little wedge point. This is my Convert Anchor Point tool. Now when I click on this point, notice what happens. It's only moving that particular Bayesian curve. So with the pen tool, if I need to move just one point, hold down your Option, and that'll give me my Bayesian curve to work with there. When I let go, it goes back into pen tool mode, and I can keep working with that. All cool? Have I lost anybody? This is all going to come together when we work on the project. Okay, so I've drawn off my line, got my curves, got everything going on, and I've deselected it. In other words, I can't see my points. Let's say I wanted to keep drawing on my line. Here's how to continue drawing. Go to the end of your point, and when I hover over it, notice my pen tool turns into a little dash line. That's telling me that, hey, I can continue picking up on that line. I click once, notice my line highlights. Now I can continue drawing off from here. If I do need to stop, let's say that's the end of my line. I don't want to close it off. I want to stop right there. Here's two ways you can break the line. You can deselect it. First of all, you can always select your little arrow tool, and then you can click off and deselect it that way. So that's one thing. Let's move that out of the way. If I drew another line, there's a keyboard shortcut to deselect something. And I put it down at the bottom of your front page of your notes. Shift Command A. If I click on Shift Command A, it will deselect the line that I'm working on. And now I can continue to draw off another line as well. All cool? Shift Command A will deselect that. Now I've redone and redrawn my line with that one. Select all of these and get rid of those. So let's check out our first project that we're going to work on. First one is the skull trace. There it is. Cool. This guy, this fun little guy. This is what you guys are going to redraw for me. Now it looks pretty menacing for now, but here we're going to make it really, really simple. First things first, if you need to zoom in, grab your little magnifying glass and you can always click and get closer into there. What do you think the easiest thing on here is to draw? You don't even need your pen tool. Circles. You've already got a circle tool. So I've got my circle tool. Grab your ellipse and you can easily draw off these circles by clicking and dragging. What I'm telling you for your instructions, however, is to set your fill color to none. So here's my fill color. Remember to set it to none is this little object, so there's that. And I'm going to set my stroke color to red. The reason why I like to use red is because it's not some color that's underneath. So if I started drawing, I can see that red color, whereas if I made it a black outline, I couldn't see black. Or if I made it dark blue, red just tends to show up really, really well. So, I can draw off my circle. Remember to hold down your Shift key. Here's another keyboard shortcut that's great for you. Right now I've got my stroke as red and my fill color as none. This little curved arrow at the top will allow you to swap out your fill and your stroke. So if I've got a circle that's not filled in, I can quickly fill it in that way. There is a keyboard shortcut for this one. Shift X. Notice it's at the very end of my little yellow sign. So let's try this again. I'm going to zoom in. Let's fill in some of the circles really quick. Grab my ellipse tool. Fill color is red, stroke is none. If I hit Shift X, it swaps those two out. So I can click and drag. Notice that my circle is stroke of red, Shift X, fills it in. Click and drag. So Shift X swaps out our fill and my stroke color. And if I wanted to, I could just quickly copy these. What do I hold down if I wanted to quickly copy something?
Command Z.
Not Command Z. That would undo it. Option. Bingo. Hold down your Option key. When you click on something, that will quickly make a copy of it. So that's another thing you can do to quickly fill in these circles. I'm not looking for 100% copies, so if they're off by a little bit, that's totally okay. So if you don't want to draw off every circle with the ellipse tool, draw one, hold down Option and drag, and then all you got to do is rescale it. Did I lose everybody on that? Easy, easy stuff. Now let's get more complex. These other shapes that we're working with are what you need to draw off using your pen tool. Let's use an easy shape, the eye socket that's right here. I'm going to grab my pen tool. Let's swap it out so I can see my line that I'm working with. So when I draw, here's how I think about shapes when I draw them with my pen tool. I want to use as few points as possible. So what I don't want to do is something like this, where I'm just constantly clicking and moving around. First of all, that's not giving me a true curved form. It's just giving me a bunch of little forms. So I'm going to delete that away. Instead, think about your curved object as a face of a clock, right? Top of a clock is 12. You've got 3, 6, and 9. So everywhere I have a curve, I'm thinking that, okay, there's kind of a clock face would fit there. A little clock would fit here. Little clock would fit here. Here's the bottom side from here. So let's start off at 12 o'clock. I've got 1 point. I'm going to move my mouse around. You guys tell me where I would run into a 12, 6, 3, or 9, okay? So tell me when to stop. Good. I'm going to click here. It's curved. I'm going to drag. And notice when I drag, I can drag it left and right until it pretty much matches up right there. So there's my first curve. Moving around. Good, right there. If I click and drag again, check out what's happening. Now it's not going to be perfect. So if I hold down my Option key, I need to kind of correct this one. Option, we're going to click on this guy, pull it up, and I can adjust that one. So let's keep on going. Let's keep on going. There you go. Click and drag around. If I wanted to, I can hold down my Option key. I get my little wedge converter point. It's pretty close. Let's keep on going. Bingo. Click and drag. And of course we're back up to here. Click and drag. That gets it relatively close. Right down here is probably the only place I would need to use my direct selection tool and clean up that particular area. This is the same thing we're going to do for each and everything that we're working on. I've got it selected. If I swap out my fill and stroke right here, got it filled in. Let's do a more complex one. Let's see. Let's do this guy right here. So he's made up of several different points. Another thing, if you have a obvious little point right here, that's a starting point where you would want it to be. So we're looking for, we'll start right there. 12. Y'all tell me where I need to stop. We'll stop right there. Click and drag. Whoops. I have my fill. I'm going to hit Shift X. Now I've got my stroke. Stop right there. Click and drag. All right. Now, if I click again, check out what's happening. Why is that happening? Why is it going off-road so much? Because I didn't stop it. I got to get rid of that point. So I'm going to click there again. Now tell me where to click again. Right there. That's good. Click and drag. Notice that my blue line is lining up. It takes a little bit of practice. Let's do that again. Bingo. Right there. Don't have to do too much. That one's off, so Option key. Click it and drag it. Kind of move it around. There we go. Let's keep going. I think so too. Click and drag. If I am off, here's another thing neglected to mention. My space bar will allow me to move a point. Maybe I need a point right there before I move on. Space bar will allow you to click and move things around. So there's that. Let's finish it out right here. Nope, too far. Option key, drag, in. Option key comes in handy a lot. So where's the next one? So where's the next one? That right there. Right there. See how that naturally just flowed right into it? Since it's a point, click and drag. I want it to be a solid point, so I don't want it to curve right here. So I'm going to click on there again. And let's see if we can finish it off. Cool. We'll swap this out, Shift X. Now it's filled in from here. What you're going to do is do one for each of the little areas on here as well. Here's another fun thing that you can do, or not fun, cool tip to know about. It is fun, I guess you could say. Notice that everything that's on one side is exactly the same on the other side. It's just flipped over, right? So rather than drawing both sides of it, we're just going to draw off one side of it, make a copy, and flip it. Here's how you're going to do that. I'll do it with the eyeball. Select your object. We're going to make a quick copy of it. I'm holding down my Option key. To flip something is one way you can transform it. Under Object, Transform. It's called, it's called reflecting your object. And I believe I gave it to you in your instructions. This will bring up your reflection dialog box, and we're just going to choose the vertical reflection. And I say OK. Notice now it's flipped over. All I've got to do is drag it into that particular side. Do the same thing for this one. You can copy it and paste it. Drag it over to reflect it, to flip it over. It's under the Transform and Reflect. We'll say OK to that. And just drag it into place from there. All cool? Once you're done with this, I want you to colorize it however you want to colorize it. You can select them, choose your fill color, change up any other color that you want to work with. Have a grand old time with that one. When you are finished with this one, you're going to print it to the color printer. So under File and Print, and make sure your printer is selected to the color printer. The background will not print. So notice on here I've got my black background template that we're working on. Once you're finished, it will only print the objects that you're making for this one. Okay, so that's our pen tool, and I'll gladly help you with that if you need to. The thing is, you're just practicing reusing this one. Here's our next tool that we're going to use, the pencil tool. If the pen tool allows you to select exactly where you want to make your points, the pencil tool is a little bit easier to work with. It looks like a regular writing pencil. Do be aware there's other types of pencils. There's a smooth and eraser. We're just going to use the pencil tool. With this one, all I have to do is click and drag, and the computer will track where my lines are moving. So notice I've got a little dotted line of blue lines, and it's tracking where they are. When I let go of my mouse, it draws the line for me. And so it's kind of a quicker, more natural way of doing it. Now it's hard to draw straight lines with the pencil tool, but if you're freeform drawing something, this comes in handy really, really well as well. So if I click and drag, all I've got to do is draw off my pencil from there. Do be aware you can change the size of the line at the very top. That's where our stroke was. If I keep drawing, it'll draw off those strokes as well. Let's make it more complex. All of your tools have options, and what we're going to use are the pencil options to pull those up. So if I'm clicking and drawing a line, it looks like this. To open up the options panel, I'm going to double click on my pencil tool. I'll bring up the pencil tool options. Here's the things that you can do with your pencil tool. When I draw it off, I can change how smooth or how rough or how detailed my line is by adjusting these tolerances. In general, the higher the number for either one of these, the smoother the line that you have. So let's say I drew off, let's make it really, really smooth, 100% on everything. So now if I tried to draw a jagged line, let's see how jagged that really turns out. Yeah, not too bad. It still didn't pick up on every little thing. But there it is, nice smooth line, just a few points if I drew faster. Let's get rid of my fill color so you can actually see that. Versus, if I set my tolerances very, very low, I'd have a much, much more, let's try drawing a jagged line now, detailed line that I'm working with. There we go. Notice the number of points that are in that line versus if I chose this other line, how few points there are in here. This is because my tolerances and my fidelity was much, much lower versus this one. The main thing to remember about that is if you want to have a smooth type line, set it pretty high. If you want to have a more detailed line, set those numbers very low. How many of y'all read the comics? Dilbert comic, like Sunday afternoon. Anybody? Nobody reads? Okay. Scott Adams is the illustrator for the Dilbert comics. He does all of his drawing in Illustrator, and he sets his pen tool. If you ever see that comic, it's a very clean-edged, very smooth characters. He sets his smoothness to be pretty high and the fidelity number to be pretty high as well when working with this. Other options you can do have to do specifically whether you want it to be filled in. So if you don't have a fill color, you can undo that. Keeping selected and editing selected paths. These are two very important ones, and I'll pull this number up. Here's the next thing you'll need to know. Let's delete everything away. If I draw a line, let's say I drew a line like this, and I stopped. If I wanted to go back and started to add on to the line, bring your cursor close to the end of it, and see how the X disappears? If the X is gone, I can click again and continue to draw on that line. I can add to the line that I've created, in other words. However, if I'm not close enough, if I started right here, I still got the X next to my cursor, and drew again, it's just going to add another line. It's going to break it right there. So if you do want to add on to it, I'll pull up our options. We're going to edit with the selected paths, and we're going to keep them selected so that I can continue to draw through those lines. Cool for that? Very simple, easy tool to use when working with those as well. Just so you know, you don't have to use these tools. If you need to erase a path or make a path a little bit more smoother, Smooth tool allows you to go over those and reform your paths so you can smooth them out. That one's pretty smooth to begin with. Or if you need to erase along a line, the eraser tool allows you to rub out specific areas of a line. And that tends to come in handy every once in a while when you're doing drawings too. What we're going to do with this one is the face trace exercise. This is an Illustrator document. There we go. You're going to trace over this particular face using your pencil tool. So let's choose our pencil tool again. Who is this guy? David, who sculpted him? Michelangelo. Good, we got some art people in here. I've got art majors who can't answer that question. Michelangelo's David. What we're going to do is you're going to do a tracing of his face. I want you to do all of the major details and see if you can do some shading, see if you can do some of the little minor inside areas. Here's how to set it up. So you've got his face. I've got my pencil tool that I'm working with. We're going to set our fill color to none. Let's change our stroke color to red so I can see it. What I like to do is to start off on the outer edges of it. Let's make that outer edge a little bit thicker. So I'm going to click and drag. I can trace over it. The outer edge is what I would call a major edge. It's the type of thing that you can definitely tell. Oh, notice I got a little too close to that. I'm going to undo my keep selected. We don't want to edit through those. I just want to draw off from there. If I do need to deselect, Shift Command A will always deselect what I'm working with. But go through and retrace off the edges that he's working with. Eyeball, those types of things. If you get to what I call a minor edge or a smaller area, change the stroke to something a little bit thinner. So let's say, let's zoom in, inside of his eye, this little shadow, or excuse me, wrinkle, could be a little bit smaller. Maybe the furrow of his brow could be a little bit smaller. Little areas underneath his eye. So having a little thicker and thin areas tend to work out. Even in his hair. Hair has edges to it. You're drawing off each of the edges. Doesn't have to be perfect. Actually, the sketchier it looks, kind of the better artistic it'll look like. If you want to add shading to them, here's how to do shading. I'm going to select a really thin line. I'm going to turn off keeping it selected. I just want to draw bunches of lines. And wherever it's darker, you can draw a series of parallel lines. If you want to make it even more darker, crosshatch those lines. In drawing, this is called crosshatching. The more lines you draw, obviously, the darker it gets. And this is kind of what I was working on before y'all got in. So here is what my previous copy, come on, there we go, looks like. Eventually you'll get something that looks like this. Lots of little lines for shading. We got the major lines drawn off for his face. You'll do the entire face. I want you to do the ear, all the eyes, do the neck, his nose, mouth, that sort of thing. Let's see if I drew off his mouth. I would just quickly draw that one. Oh, now it's obviously very smooth. Maybe choose a thinner line for lips. Ah, too smooth. Yep, let's bump down that fidelity. Remember to pull up your options. I'm simply double clicking on the tool that I'm working with. Since this is a little bit shaded, maybe I would give them some shade lines. And even if it's off, that's okay. Happy tree from there. All done, all shaded. You can spend as much or as little time on this as you want as possible. Same thing as the other one. When you're finished with this, we're going to print it off on the color printer, file and print. This will also kind of give you a preview of what it looks like. See how it's all coming together? It'll look really, really cool. Have a great little style to it, very sketchy style once it's done. But the picture itself will not print. I've set up this document so that it's more of a tracing template once you're done for that one. All cool? When you are done and ready to print these, be sure your name is on it and you'll turn those in. Like I said, it's not due today, so if you don't finish it up, you'll have the weekend to work on that, and we'll see how far people get if y'all need to work on these next week as well. Any questions before I go?
When you're done dragging them, can I have them?
Yes, I'm going to turn them back into you. Put them up on your refrigerator, give them to your mom and dad for Christmas presents. Do whatever you want to with them. All right, I'll let y'all get started. Mom, look what we're doing in college.
Are these due at the end of class?
These are not due at the end of class. Your vector box, you have to finish that.
Still on next class.
Let's see how far people get. Most people are able to finish most of this by the end of class. Next week we get to make beards, so I'm going to give you all time to do that.